Well, welcome back to Bookstorm Podcast. Listeners literally all over the world. I think we're up to 90 countries, all 50 US states, and almost 2,000 cities. And we know why. You're here because of great authors like the ones we have with us here today. We're super excited because we've waited a while, and we have Preston and Child with their new book, Angel of Vengeance. And we're super happy that we have Lincoln Child with us here today. Lincoln, welcome to Bookstorm Podcast.
Thank you for having me, both of you. I'm excited to be here. I'm sorry it took a while to get us here. And speaking of us, I'm hoping Doug can join us. We'll let him in if he does.
We'll let him in, sure. Now, let me just tell our listeners a little bit about you both because they love your writing. We love the Pendergast series, but there may be some things they're not familiar with. In the early 1990s, Preston and Child teamed up to write suspense novels, and we are happy about it. Relic was the first. It was made into a Paramount film, as we remember. I don't know if you know this, but the last 20 novels in a row have been New York Times best sellers, including several reaching the #1 point. Congratulations. What a feat this is. Relic and the Cabinet of Curiosities were selected by a poll of readers for the National Public Radio as one of the 100 greatest thrillers ever written. Wow, that's really something. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lincoln, and then I'll tell you about Doug, hoping he might join us. And I love this about them. You have to check out the website and you have to look at the bios because these are two really talented thriller authors, and they're funny. They're also funny. So Lincoln was born in Westport, Connecticut. He seemed to have acquired an interest in writing as early as the second grade, where he wrote a story entitled Bumble the Elephant. Wow, quite impressive.
Chris Storm.
Then later,
this is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter,
fantasy,
books that make a difference.
Was 400
We're diving down
long,
deep
and you
with
never
beloved
finished.
authors about their
But
stories.
it's available if
We're
you want to
exposing
read it.
hot button
It is
topics,
because I read
heartfelt
something here, but it's
themes,
under lock and
the
key,
issues
and no
that
one can
affect
find
each
it.
of us in our
Well,
own lives as
I
siblings,
think a price can be
parents,
negotiated.
partners, friends, as
We'll
human
take you up on
beings.
that. Then
We're
you list
braving
some
new
highlights
ideas,
of your child's
fresh
life,
thoughts,
and I just love this
hard
so much.
lessons, and
In
important
1970,
truths.
voted most
Those
likely
kinds
to
of
be
things
beaten up
that
in
stay
shop
with
class.
us long
we've all-
after we
we've all
turn the
been there
last page
sometimes.
and close the book.
I love this. 1971 was sent a Led Zeppelin album as a Christmas gift by his well-meaning grandmother who did not listen to the lyrics. Okay, 77, dissected a cat, gave up on the idea of being a medical journalist. Okay, like this. And then this one, 1984, discovered Jack Daniels. I loved it all. There were so many more in there. You are, however, in all seriousness, began as an editorial assistant at St. Martin's. You worked your way up, very hard earned and well-deserved, becoming a full editor. And from what I see here, you founded the company's mass market horror division?
Yes.
Wow.
St. Martin's was the first hardcover publisher to create a paperback arm. Before that, it was heretical. The thought, that a paperback company would be owned by a hardcover. Hardcover companies always had big auctions for their books. And so we bucked the tide. And I was assigned to the ghost story and horror division to get to start it up, basically, since I had written some anthologies of ghost stories for St. Martin's already.
Wow, that's very impressive. And I've got to end it up with quoting Publishers Weekly. They say Preston and Child stand head and shoulders above their rivals. Well, Kristen and I do agree. We thoroughly enjoy your books. We're so happy you're here with us today. Can't wait to dive into this Angel of Vengeance.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Lincoln, I'd like to give our listeners some of the background of the book that we're here to talk about today. And I promise not to give away any spoilers, which is somewhat difficult with this one because there's something at every turn, every dark corner. And in this story, Angel of Vengeance, now, if I'm right, this is your 22nd book in the Pendergast series. Is that correct?
I have to plead ignorance. That sounds about right. You know, I've
Yeah.
written myself and Doug about 44 books, and I think that's correct. 22nd or 23rd. Yep.
Excellent. Well, in this series, it features, of course, a well-known character, and that is Aloysius Pendergast. He is a paranormal FBI investigator, but this particular series within a series also features his ward, Constance Green, a very mysterious character, which we'll probably talk about her a little bit more. Now, into this story, Pendergast has used a dimensional portal to follow Constance Green to 1880 New York City. It's a very interesting place, a little different than what you might expect in your story. She's angry, she has been betrayed, and she's taking matters into her own hands. She's teetering on the unstable, she's so angry, which is adding a whole nother element of tension to this story. Now, they are trying to protect Constance's siblings from an evil doctor and serial killer, Dr. Enoch Lang. He is after something that Constance has developed. Now, they don't know it at first, but somebody else has followed them through the portal, and that is Pendergast's evil twin brother, Diogenes. Diogenes has connected with Dr. Lang, and let's just say a lot of manipulations are beginning. There's a lot of complications in this story. Dr. Lang is one of Pendergast's ancestors, and that, of course, has all kinds of complications in terms of we can't take him out because then perhaps Pendergast and his brother might not exist. But the other complication is the fact that Constance is hell bent on retribution and vengeance. But at every turn, there are surprises awaiting them, especially from Dr. Lang. Did you want to add anything to that summary?
Yes, I want to add my congratulations for distilling about 10 books into 2 minutes. That was a very good job.
Thank you.
I am going to say a few words which are not really spoilers because they are on our website, which will explain a little bit of all this. You know, we don't write science fiction, we write contemporary thrillers, but you know, when time travel comes up, and of course it does, it has a whiff of science fiction about it. The backstory here is that Constance Green was the ward of Enoch Lang, as you alluded to, and Enoch Lang had a project that he knew, an evil project that would take him more than a lifetime to finish. And so his first project was to find an arcanum or a formula to lengthen his own lifespan artificially. And Constance was his guinea pig. And so Constance in our day is now aging at a normal rate, but she's appears 23, 24, and Lang did bad things to her family back in the New York of 1880 when she was young, really young. So she has never been able to get closure. Obviously, that was 100 years ago, you know, but that's messed with her head. So she knows things that only somebody who's been reading books for 150 years would know. And she goes back to, well, what do you know?
Partner.
Welcome. We're super happy. We just now have Doug Preston joining us, and we're excited. The only thing you've missed, Doug, is we did a little introduction, told a little bio. Kristen gave a history of the book, which we're excited about, and we're going to dive into our questions. But before we do, I gave a little of Lincoln's bio because we have listeners all over the world, and I've got to tell a little bit more about you if you have a little time.
Well, sure. Make it good. Yeah.
Okay. I told about your writing team and all of your accomplishments, and we are big fans of your thriller writing. But I also saw in your bio that you guys are pretty funny. And I wanted to tell what you had written here. Doug Preston, born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, grew up in the deadly boring suburb of Wellesley. And let me just shout out people in Wellesley. I didn't say it. Following a distinguished matriculation at a private nursery school where he was almost immediately expelled, Other notable events in his life include losing the loss of a fingertip at the age of 3 to a bicycle, the loss of 2 front teeth to his brother Richard's fist, and numerous scuffles with Richard. I just thought that was so funny. And thank you for adding that personal element to the bio. We love that.
Well, thank you. I'm sure my brother Richard is not happy about it, but maybe he won't catch wind of this podcast.
We all have those sibling stories. On a serious note, you helped to found the International Thriller Writers, and you currently serve as president of the Authors Guild. Am I right about that?
Well, I just stepped down from the presidency of the Authors Guild, but I was president for the last 4 years.
Wow, that's just amazing. So we're thrilled to have you join us. Kristen just gave a little excerpt, and Lincoln was just filling in the blanks. Lincoln, did you have anything more you wanted to say?
Just to finish what I was saying, Doug, I was explaining the backstory of Constance a little bit, so we wouldn't need to go into some of the details. What we have not written is a time travel story per se. It is to a parallel universe. So we worked very hard to make this not a time travel story full of, strange retro 1950s gadgets, but rather occurring in a parallel universe where what people do from our universe who visit does not affect our own continuum. So in other words, somebody could go on Fifth Avenue and, the famous quote, and it wouldn't affect our life stream.
Well, did you confess to the listeners that you had the hots for your own character, Constance?
I didn't phrase it quite so crudely, but yes, I did say that I prefer Constance and you prefer Corey, but that's just a matter of taste, which will be immediately obvious to anybody who sees the two of us.
No wonder he was talking about Constance so much. I knew there must be something more to it. Well, we loved it. Okay. We loved every bit about it. It was mind-blowing. I love when Pendergast said, I challenge you to think of a single technological advancement that ultimately wasn't also turned against humanity in some way. It really made the reader think. Nuclear power, the bomb, genetics, euthanasia, the internet. Could each of you tease our readers a little bit with some little more clues about the moral dilemma found in your parallel time machine invention? Should we always seize the good in a discovery, knowing that we might be risking some bad? It made us think a lot deeper.
Well, we're a strange species in that we are very clever, but we are also very stupid in some ways. I mean, the great scientist E.O. Wilson said, the problem with humanity is this: we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And that is very dangerous. And I really think that's true. Now with AI, where are we going with that? I mean, there are a lot of science fiction writers have, starting with, 2001, the movie and the book, have pointed out the dangers of AI, that maybe AI will take over the world and decide that humanity is just a problem and needs to be eliminated. So yes, we are both clever and exceedingly stupid at the same time.
Lincoln,
And we also have a lust for power and wealth that if one of us is too altruistic to do anything about, somebody else will seize upon. When the internet first came out, we were very happy and thought, finally, information can be free, can get everywhere. Now people behind Iron Curtain countries can learn everything. And look what's happened. Who could have guessed about malware and spam and cameras on every corner of a Beijing street? It never occurred to us. And same thing with CRISPR or DNA technology, or as Doug said, AI. It's not so much the technology as it is the species that's wielding it.
I love how you put that. And thanks for putting it in this book because yes, it's fiction, but there's real life elements that made us think.
Yeah. In fact, I was thinking about innovation and when we innovate ahead of our ability to maybe dispose of the waste from that product that we've innovated, like chemicals. And so you brought up a lot of the gray area associated with these kinds of inventions. I thought that was fascinating.
I think Doug and I would love to hear from any reader who can name a technology, either emerging or extant, that has not proven us to be correct there.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Enoch Lang, at one point in the story, experiences a deep sense of Weltschmerz. And I love this German word, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this. He was observing an act of human cruelty, which was very ironic. Now, this German word is described as world pain, or maybe a weariness or sadness because of an awareness of evil and suffering. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this concept, particularly since you have a story that has both a historical and a contemporary, that parallel time frame. And do you think this concept is more applicable now, or is it something that has always existed because people have always been cruel to one another?
Well, I think it's always existed. I mean, Enoch Lang is a very evil man, but what we were trying to show there is that he's also he's not a complete psychopath either. He has feelings, and that almost makes him more evil because a true psychopath has no empathy for others, and you can almost excuse their cruelty because they don't get it. They don't get how it's hurting other people. But Enoch Lang gets it, and he experiences Weltschmerz. He experiences the kind of inherent cruelty in our existence, where as happy as we are, it's only fleeting, and the world presents a sadness that we all experience, and he experiences it as well, even as he's committing cruelty and adding to the horrors of the world. So it's very ambiguous, and we a kind of a deep kind of character. We hope.
Yeah, it definitely showed that intentionality. You're right. And that conscious thought about evil. And I was thinking too about this concept now, especially amongst younger people. And there's that world weariness that many have expressed. So it was a really interesting concept to kind of see it set back in 1880 as well.
Well, there's a moment in the book, there's a mini climax where there's a conversation between Lang and Pendergast on exactly that subject. What is one person's vision of the world that might create an Eden worth seeing through if it means Armageddon for the rest of humanity, and I mean, arguments can be made on either side. What is evil, what isn't evil? But I think we have to go with the mentality of the mob in this case, and agree that Lang is misguided in his intentions, which is to rid the world of most of humanity, and that has been his intention ever since Cabinet of Curiosities.
I also really thought this was interesting, and I want to tease our readers. There was a wondrous quest for the elixir of life. It's also known as an elixir for immortality, a potion that grants the drinker either eternal life or eternal youth. Now you made the reader think again, to consider the good and evil that even this coveted discovery might hold. Who's allowed to live forever? Who isn't? What effect does this have on the population, future generations? Why do we, as age-old time, have this quest to live forever? And how do you see this being misused?
Well, we are on the verge medically of significantly extending human life. I mean, they're starting to unravel the mystery of aging, of why we age, and also how to stop it, or at least slow it down. And of course, we're rushing forward, as we always do as a species, to find this discovery and implement it and give the world this wonderful discovery. Well, stop and think about it for a second. First of all, that could add enormously to the burdens of the world in caring for old people. Secondly, if it's a very expensive technology and only the rich can afford it, well, that's kind of a horror in itself, right? Or let's say that it's an extremely inexpensive technology and everyone can afford it. Well, there's a different kind of horror there in terms of the population increase. And so, we don't think of these things as we are rushing to make these discoveries. And a lot of the books that Lincoln and I have written deal with scientific conundrums like that. It isn't just this series, this trilogy, but many of our books deal with those same kinds of problems where science, goes where no one has gone before, right? And finds something wonderful, but you flip that over and you find a horror on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Lincoln, anything to add?
I think Doug covered it very well. I would just add that that elixir that you mentioned is on sale Tuesdays and Thursdays at Starbucks right now. But you have to know what to ask for.
Yeah, make
Okay.
the check out to Lincoln Child.
We're all going to line up for that elixir. We're not going to think of the repercussions. We sometimes are very selfish human beings, aren't we?
Yes, that is a joke. That's a joke.
There's a scene in your story when somebody has knowledge of the future and they have the opportunity to change the course of future events and they decide to do so. Now, I'm not going to say anything more about it, but I really love this scene. And I was thinking about how a quote tweak here and there could have not only repercussions on what happens in the future, but also be an overwhelming burden to the person who can wield that kind of power. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that agony and suffering is just inevitable? So to make the tweaks here and there really is futile? Wouldn't another evil simply, stand in its place? And Lincoln, I'd like to ask you that question first.
Okay, thank you. If it's the scenes that I think you're referring to as ones that came to my mind, and I asked Doug if he was okay with putting them in the book, and we struggled with it a little bit because we don't like our characters playing marionettes or puppeteers, I should say, too much. But you're in that scene, there's somebody who can change the course of known future events and end the suffering of many, many people very easily. And you're right. I mean, if someone was able to do that, there's nothing to say that something else couldn't come along and take the place of that. I mean, if 10 years from now, my son, born out of wedlock, that I don't know about, rises to a dictator, I would never have expected that, and if certain evil people in the 19th century were removed, and today's dictators don't live, or whatever, or people who invented certain cruel devices didn't live, who's to say other people wouldn't have risen to take their place and do equally, if not worse, things? So I don't think you can really answer that except to go back to the point that unfortunately human beings are by nature selfish and cruel, if not immediately, at least a percentage of them. And it's very, very hard to mitigate the danger as well as the promise of future events once you have set them in motion.
Yeah, well said. Doug, did you want to add to that?
No, Lincoln put it very well. I mean, one of our characters, Diogenes, realizes he can do something that will change, that will make the world a better place. and he does it. But as Link pointed out, does it make the world a better place? Well, we don't know yet. And neither does Diogenes. So
Absolutely. Yeah, very interesting because it really makes you think about human nature and, wielding that power too, and that burden of responsibility. I wouldn't want that aspect either. So very, very interesting.
And we
Well,
don't sound like pessimists either. We have the highest hopes for the human race. But some of the characters in this book are very pessimistic, and actually it's the pessimistic characters for the most part that are stymied in their attempts. So we have high hopes that the future century will, God willing, be better than the last one was.
we're
And that's
joining you in that hope.
and that's what makes a great story. So, our listeners, you've got to get this one, Angel of Vengeance by Preston and Child. We loved it. We really loved it.
Now, we've got to ask you before we let you go, because I know our listeners will want to know. Can you tell us what's on your radar? What's coming up next for the two of you?
well, Link, you go ahead. Tell about the book we're writing now.
Well, Doug has just published a novel, Extinction, which is an awesome read, and it actually goes into some of the things we were talking about early in the show, about good technology gone, not necessarily in the way you'd like it to. But in the near future, we are, Angel of Vengeance comes out in about a month and a half. And we are now working on the next Nora Corey novel, which we've learned the hard way that we should try and make our stories, separate, and each one is a fast, hard driving work of action. And this one, it takes place in a secret canyon in New Mexico, where there's a group of ancient, now extinct dwellers who did some very awful things, and is coming back to haunt the present day Southwest. And both Corey and Nora are hip deep in trying to solve it.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. And we would love in the future if you want to come back and talk about that story. That would be wonderful. We would love to have you back on the show. And in the meanwhile, I want to let our listeners know how to connect with you. You have a joint website that is fantastic. It's www.prestonchild.com. And on the website, your readers can connect with you through a newsletter where you send out updates in the Pendergast universe and some of what you are about both individually and together. So I love the website, and we really encourage people to check that out and connect with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about this fantastic book. We thoroughly enjoyed it. We loved hearing your insights, and please come back again.
We'd
Thank
be
you
happy
so
to.
much.
Thank you so much. Loved it.
Thank you for having us. You were a great interviewer. We appreciate it very much.
Yes,
Thank
Thank you.
absolutely.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Kristen, that was really an interesting conversation. And I know that that's going to spark people to want to read that book. There were a few more things that we didn't get a chance to talk about. And one was how much I loved the mansion that everything took place in. Its secret passageways, its hidden tunnels, the fact that Constance had lived there before and knew its secrets. She had been a different person with a different life. I had to ask you, do houses have personalities and stories of their own? I almost felt like this house was another character.
Agree with you. It had kind of that gothic feel to it, both then and currently. So I thought that was one of the really cool aspects here is even though we have kind of parallel situations and two timelines, the house retained that gothic feel of something momentous and unnerving and dark was going on. So yeah, I think these, not just homes, but also other buildings retain that feeling of something that has occurred either historically or currently. How about you?
I think so. And the talk of their next upcoming novel taking place in a cave,
Yeah.
that sounds very mysterious also. The only other thing I just want to say something more about was your question about having the power to change the future and the responsibility that comes with it. That notion really just overwhelms me. The responsibility that I've got to step into the future and remove this person. Okay, I was thinking of all of the evil people that have ever lived. Okay, we've got Hitler, Stalin, Genghis Khan, Mussolini, the list goes on and on. You remove them. But what about the people who are good that are still there? Do you go to help them? Like, where does it end? We've got Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Mother Teresa. There is such a responsibility. I don't know how anyone would handle it.
Yeah, especially when your own family and your own friends, you've got things that you would change in all of our lives. If only that person hadn't gone there or wasn't driving that day. So I think you would be almost on overwhelm trying to right wrongs, but also prevent harm. And I would not want that responsibility because you are playing God and we're not designed to play God over our lives or anyone else's.
And I like what you said. You eliminate one person, but more often that thinking or evil thinking often comes in a group and someone else is just going to rise up. It's really, this is what I loved about this book. It made me think very deeply about real life issues and the implications.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to tell our listeners about some other upcoming authors that are amazing. We are just loving these books for the summer and fall lineup. It is fantastic. Just a couple, we can't list them all, but we've got Amy Runyon with Mademoiselle FL, Shelley Noble, The Colony Club, Amy Neff, The Days I Loved You Most, Jessica Strasser returns with Catch You Later. We've got Jeffrey Deaver and Isabella Maldonado with Fatal Intrusion, Jamie Brenner, A Novel Summer, Brian Freeman writing for Robert Ludlum, The Born Shadow. We are so thrilled and we're very thankful, listeners, that you are listening in. We ask that you continue to share our social media. We've got you all over the world, as Chris was talking about, but we just want you to know we're grateful. We love hearing back from you and keep telling us what other authors that we should bring on Bookstorm Podcast. And you can find us, of course, on Facebook, on Instagram, on X. We are on YouTube under Bookstorm and Podcast. You can see all of our videos. We are on TikTok, and we have our own website where you can connect to all of those things as well, bookstormpodcast.com. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.